Hi and welcome to the first episode of Aquafan's Gardening Guide. Today we're going to be talking about how to make your own potting soil. So before we get into how to make the potting soil itself, let's talk about a few reasons why you should make your own potting soil and a couple reasons why you shouldn't. So starting off, why should you make your own potting soil? Well, number one, you're going to know exactly what's going into it. You can look at everything on the table here and I can see exactly what's going into it, whether it be chemicals, fertilizer, or compost or dirt. I know exactly what's going into it. Now, number two reason why you should make your own potting soil, going along with number one, is you can dictate exactly what's going into it. So, for example, if you need to change the pH of your soil, make it more acidic or more alkaline, you can add things such as wood ash, sulfur, or aluminum sulfate. So you can do exactly what you need to for your pH of your soil by mixing those things in, and then also you can affect what type of nutrients go in your soil by adding things such as fertilizer or compost into the soil that you're making. Number three reason that you should make your own soil, and it's a big one for me, is coco coir. Coco coir is great because it's an alternative to peat moss. Now, peat moss is found out there in the wild. You can find it. It's a non-renewable source because of the way that it's created as peat moss, where you can continue to use coco coir. It won't break down like peat moss does. And peat moss is also acidic, where coco coir is neutral when it comes to pH. Now, the only downside to coco coir is it also has zero nutrients in it. But we're going to take care of that in today's video. You'll see exactly how to make it so that way you do have nutrient soil. And it is not inert, as you would call coco coir. Now, the number four reason for making your own soil, your own potting soil, is it's fun. You have a lot of fun, and it's always great to be able to say that you made something yourself. So those are the reasons why you should make your own potting soil. Now, why should you not make your own potting soil? Well, number one, if you're planting directly into the ground, it's not really worth making it, hence potting soil. So in the ground, it's not really worth it. You just use the dirt in the ground, maybe add some compost and some fertilizer to the dirt, and just plant it directly in the ground. Number two, if you're using maybe a large pot that you don't plan on moving, and especially if it's made of a non-permeable material, grow bags and terracotta are permeable materials. They lose water, which is good because you don't want your plant to get root rot, but you also want to be able to hold on to that water. The soil that we're making today holds on to water well, so it's great for terracotta and or grow bags. If you're using plastic containers and that's the life of your plant is going to spend the time in those plastic containers, you don't plan on moving them a lot, then maybe making your own soil isn't really worth it. You can just buy store-bought soil. But this is still a great thing to use in that circumstance. It's just, you might be wasting a little bit of time. So we went over some reasons why you should make your own potting soil and why you shouldn't. Now let's get into how to actually make your own potting soil. So we're going to go over to the wheelbarrow over here, and we're going to talk about everything that you need. So our wheelbarrow is what we use for mixing our potting soil. Then we have our pitchfork to help us mix it. Now I've seen some people, we're making one bag of each for a few grow bags of plants and for starting some seedlings. But I've seen people that will lay out a tarp on the ground and get a bunch of these materials, multiplying them up and mix it all together to make a large amount of potting soil. So if you're doing that, you might not just need the wheelbarrow and the pitchfork, you might need a pitchfork and a large area that's covered to be able to mix everything together. Now, when it comes to the actual ingredients here, we're going to go through each one. So we have our coco coir, which I talked about before. I like to use Urban Worm Company. They make great coco coir, and whatever company you decide to use is fine. Just make sure that it's pre-washed. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of stuff in it, and I usually get it compacted like this. We're going to add it to the water, and you'll see later on how it absorbs the water to expand. So you need that. Speaking of water, you also need a way to measure out 1 gallon of water. So that way you can put that 1 gallon of water in the wheelbarrow to absorb into the coco coir. Now, like I said, it's inert, the coco coir. It has no nutrients. So you're going to need a way to add nutrients back into it. This is Cali Magic. It has calcium and magnesium in it, which are two of the smaller but very important nutrients that you're going to find in most soils that the coco coir does not have. So that adds that back into there. You'll just follow the directions. It actually has directions on it for using coco coir. It says 1 teaspoon per gallon, and to make sure that you add it in when using coconut coir or coco coir. So you mix it into the gallon of water before you put it in the coco coir. Now the next thing is I like to use some fertilizer. I usually use the Miracle Grow. This is the organic one. You can use the regular one. Just make sure that if you're using your soil for any type of growing food like tomatoes or peppers or herbs or anything, that you're using food safe fertilizer like this one is. You can also use the regular in the smaller box. It's a little bit cheaper, the tomato plant food by Miracle Grow. Now what this is going to do, it's going to be quick release for our fertilizer. So it's going to put the nutrients into our soil right quick and easy to access right away. Now we're going to use that cocoa coir is going to be very light, which is great for wanting to move plants around like grow bags. And it's also going to help hold on to water, which is good for permeable containers like grow bags. We're going to mix it with dirt. So this is just topsoil. If you have a yard where you can pull dirt from, you can just use that dirt. Just make sure you're doing 1-to-1. This doesn't look like 1-to-1, but remember, this is going to expand. So 1-to-1, 1 part cocoa coir, 1 part topsoil or dirt. Then we're going to have our slow release fertilizer. This is black cow manure. I like to use this stuff. It's company Black Cow with a K for cow, and it is composted manure, so it doesn't smell bad because it's composted. Now, if you have your own compost that you've made, use that. That's probably better. And obviously, it's going to be free for you because you're not going to have to go out and buy this. But if you don't, this is what I like to use, the manure here. Now, when we mix those things together, we're going to get a very nutritious soil, but it's going to be clumpy and heavy, and it's going to cancel out all the benefits of cocoa coir because it's not going to be light anymore. The roots are not going to be able to travel through it because it's so clumped together, mainly because of this guy here. So then what we add in is our perlite. And the perlite, if you've ever bought garden soil or potting soil, you see those little white beads? That's what perlite is. It's actually hydrated volcanic glass or obsidian. And that's what those little perlite beads are, and it helps to loosen up the soil. That's the last thing we're going to add in. And it really should be 1 part to 1 part to 1 part to 1 part. It should all be a quarter of each. But I've noticed with the perlite, I just kind of add it in until it looks right, until it looks like good garden soil, and it tends to work out well. And then at that point, we'll have a nice aerated soil that is very fluffy and easy to work with. It's very light for moving containers around, and it'll hold on to water for those permeable containers that we like to use so much. So with all of that said, let's actually get into how to use those ingredients now. And now we're going to move over to the wheelbarrow. All right, so here we are. We have a gallon of water, and it's in this bucket. You can trust me that it's a gallon. It's up to the gallon line. And we're going to add in some CaliMag first. Now this CaliMagic stuff, it says to use 1 teaspoon of CaliMagic per 1 gallon of water. So we're going to measure that out. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. All right, there we go. And then next we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of this fertilizer. Make sure you read the instructions on your fertilizers to say what it does, because it might be different. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. We don't want to over nutrients, give too much nutrients to our, smells kind of fishy. Sometimes that's what you get with the fertilizers, but you don't want to give too much nutrients and you don't want to give too little nutrients for obvious reasons. So we're going to need this to dissolve in. So I'm going to mix this in, and while I'm talking, you're going to see how I'm going to add in the cocoa coir. So you can see it comes with this little container here, and you can actually fill it with a gallon of water and it'll expand in there. But since we're mixing it with other things, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it in the wheelbarrow. So I'm going to mix this together, dump the water in the wheelbarrow, and place in the cocoa coir. And you're going to be watching a time lapse of that happening while I tell you what I'm doing here. So now while I'm mixing this, you can see the cocoa coir as it expands. And while it's expanding, you're going to see that it starts to look almost like wood pulp, and then it eventually starts to look like a fibrous dirt, which is exactly what we're looking for. We want it to be a very fibrous dirt, and that's what we're going to mix into everything else. And it'll start to look like it's nice and light and fluffy. There might be a few parts that stay hard that you're going to have to break up yourself, but that's what you'll eventually start to see, is that it'll be nice and fluffy, and that's when you can start to move on to the next step, which is what you're going to see right now. All right, so now we have all of our cocoa coir done, mostly done. There's still a little bit of clumps, but it's fine. At this point, if you're wearing any bracelets or a watch, it's a great idea to take it off now, because we're going to get our hands a bit dirty. So first thing we're going to do is go in here and make sure all of this is broken up. Looks nice and light and fluffy, all broken up, exactly what we're looking for. You might have seen in that time lapse we laid down a garbage bag. The wheelbarrow started leaking, so that's why we did that. Make sure that whatever container you're doing this in is not leaking. If you need to do something like that, go ahead and do it. You also might have seen a few times in there where I stuck my hand in and started to break things up a little bit. You'll need to do that as well. And that way you can see it's very fibrous. You can see all the little fibers in there. But that's the cocoa coir. Now we're going to go ahead and dump in some dirt, or in this case, topsoil. We want kind of equal parts. I'm guessing that's probably going to be about half of this bag. So I'm going to start with that, start with a little bit like that. Put this back to the side. Let me go ahead and just start mixing that in. trying to make it as mixed as possible. Now, if you don't like getting your hands dirty, you can try using the pitchfork for this. It's going to take a lot longer, but the pitchfork is mainly for later when we add in the manure or compost, and it's going to start to get kind of clumpy, and that pitchfork might help break it up. We might not even need the pitchfork, but last time I made soil, I definitely did need the pitchfork, so that one's kind of, you'll see if you need it or not. So that's starting to mix in much better there. Let's go ahead and add in a little bit more topsoil. That's probably all we're going to need. We'll mix that in, and then finally we'll add in the manure. So as I'm starting to mix this in, you're going to see it's going to start looking a little less brown, a little more gray from the dirt, but still a hint of brown in there, almost like some type of tannish brown. It's starting to look more like potting soil and less like wood chips, which is essentially what it was. Coco coir is the husk of a coconut that is then ground up, and it's usually washed in salt water, in the seawater, which is interesting. And that's how it's made. So now we're mixing that in with topsoil, which has some dirt. And there's a little bit of mulchy stuff in it, which is all fine. So there, that's looking pretty good. And this is much lighter than if it was just the dirt, which is again why we're using the coco coir, and it will hold on to moisture a little bit better. So there we have the topsoil and the coco coir mixed together. Now I'm going to add in the manure. Remember, if you're using your own homemade compost, that is perfectly fine. You can use that instead. But this manure is a bit clumpy, and it's going to have a nice slow release for our fertilization and our nutrients. And clumpy, see, look at this piece right here. It's a big piece of poop. It does not smell like poop. It does not feel like poop. That's because it is poop that is composted. So it says on the bag, composted manure. And again, it's fine just to use your own compost. As I mix this together, now it's really starting to get that dirt look, where it looks like soil. But you can see it's getting kind of clumpy, very thick and heavy, and that's where the perlite's going to come in a moment. But you can see as I lift and flip, there's still some brown spots. So this is something that's not yet mixed together. So we want to make sure that we're really getting in there and flipping it, not just mixing the top level stuff. And this is where the pitchfork might be a little bit helpful. So I'm going to grab that in just a second. But as I scoop under and flip, you'll see the coco coir still. So I'm going to grab this pitchfork here. All right, I got a pitchfork. Let's go ahead now, and I'm going to scoop under and just kind of flip a little bit. Remember, we're just trying to get it so the brown is evenly mixed in, like right there, all that clump of brown. That we don't want that. We want kind of even brown throughout, mixed in with the black and the gray. So as I see those little clumps of brown, that's what I kind of want to mix up and break up. And in just a moment, we're going to add in the perlite. Now you might be asking, what's the point of adding in the coco coir and the greatness of the coco coir if we're making it all clumpy again? Well, a quarter of our soil is coco coir, so it's going to be automatically lighter than if we were just using regular gardening soil. And when we use it, it again holds on to that moisture. So that's what we really need. Really, we're adding the perlite to really help with, again, lightening it a little bit, but more so it's just to allow the soil to be more loose. When we have loose soil, then the roots can then travel through the soil without being inhibited. We want the roots to be able to expand and continue to let our plant grow. So this is mixed enough for us to go ahead and add in the perlite. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that and dump that in real quick. I'm not exactly sure how much we're going to need. Again, you kind of got to do it by eye. So I'm going to start with one bag like that. Actually, I'm going to start with that. That's not even a whole bag yet. I'm going to mix that in, and then I'm going to mix in a little bit more. You see that white cloud come up? Volcanic glass. That's obsidian, which is pretty cool. And if you touch it, it feels, it looks and kind of feels like styrofoam. Like if I squeeze it, it does crumble like styrofoam. Imagine styrofoam that's a little bit harder. And that's pretty much what it feels like. So right here, this kind of looks like dirt and snow. We want to mix it until it looks like typical potting soil. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and go back in with my hands. Again, not a great idea to be wearing a bracelet or a watch right now. So if you're wearing either of those, it's a good idea to take it off for this. And just kind of go in here and mix it up. And you can see now it's starting to look actually like potting soil. So this is much better. And again, just like we were doing with the brown clumps before, if we go in and flip it and we see a lot of white, a white clump, that's got to be mixed a bit more. And at this point, we've pretty much made our potting soil. All that's left is to finish mixing it. So that's what I'm going to do here. And we should have a good potting soil when we're done that is great for grow bags. Now, when you look at this, you might be trying to figure out, cost effectiveness. Is this really worth it? You can go to the store and buy just a bag of potting soil for a lot less. Well, if you're using a self-watering pot, which is semi-permeable to be able to pull the water up, or you are using grow bags, which are semi-permeable, they sell special soil for that. And we're essentially making that soil, and that soil is more expensive. So if you're going to buy that type of soil, why not make it yourself and save a little bit of money? Where again, if you're just going in the ground or using a big stone pot or plastic pot, it might be worth it just to buy the regular soil that you buy at the store. Where this is special purpose soil and potting soil for what is becoming a lot more popular nowadays, self-watering pots and grow bags. I'm gonna go ahead and add in the rest of that perlite. It looks like we're just using one bag, not both bags today. But that should be perfect, just that right there. And we'll let the cloud disperse a little bit and hop right back in and start mixing again. And again, we want all of it to disappear. And again, we're going for a 1:1 to 1:1 ratio, about a quarter of each. Quarter cocoa coir, a quarter soil or dirt, or topsoil, a quarter manure or compost, in our case composted manure, and a quarter perlite. Excuse me for a second, I'm going to cough, I'm going to cut out the audio for that. Be careful not to breathe in the perlite. And that should be good. So that looks like a nice mixture of potting soil right there. And I'll step out of the way so my shadow's not in it in just a second so you can get a real good look at it. And you can see with how much we started with the first little bit of cocoa coir, how much soil we actually have now. And there's our homemade potting soil. All right, so thank you for checking out the first episode of Aquafan's Garden Guides. I plan to have a few more. I don't know what frequency yet, maybe once a month, maybe once a week. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought. But hopefully you learned something that you can use in your own garden on how to make your own potting soil. If you have any questions, feel free to post it in the comments down below, or if you have any tips for fellow gardeners, let them know. I'd also like to give a big shout out to where I learned about cocoa coir. From Kevin from Epic Gardening. Go check out his YouTube channel. He has some great stuff. Epic Homestead and Epic Gardening. Kevin over there, along with a few others he's working with now, he has some great garden tips as well. So go ahead and check out his stuff, because he's how I found out about cocoa coir to be able to make my own soil here. Now, please don't forget to check out the Gab, the Gettr, the Parler, the Truth Social, and the Minds at Aquafan for social media. And then checking out the videos. If you're watching on one of these platforms, check out the other two, YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. So thank you for checking out this episode of Aquafan's Gardening Guides, and I hope to see you in the future.